Hello again. Welcome back to our final lecture of the course on the making of the Chinese Buddhist canon. I decided that for this last lecture, I needed to talk to you a little bit about what the future holds for you, as all of you begin to enter into your careers. Some of you have already entered into your career, but taking this course, and some of you are getting degrees. And whether or not you're, whatever field you are, the future is going to be very demanding of you. And the ways in which I've been having you work, I cannot tell you that this is the way you should try to work for the rest of your career. Just the opposite. I believe that our way of study and scholarship is changing. Sometimes we don't notice it. On the surface, universities have continued to operate. People go to classrooms when the pandemic isn't upon us. They go to the library, they read books. But underneath that surface, there have been enormous shifts during my lifetime. And I don't think those compare to what's coming. So that's why I decided I would give this last lecture a bit on the future, to try to suggest to you that you need to become really aware that things are going to change, and that you need to think about this constantly in terms of your life and your work. At this moment in time, of course, we have finally fully entered into a handheld device era. There are billions of handheld devices all over the world. We are using these handheld devices to access data, Google, telephone, email, text messaging. These have been incredible instruments of change. And instead of having what we had before, we're now faced with these small, but oh so powerful instruments. Well, I just read that someone has been asking Apple, how long is the iPhone going to last? How many years do you think are ahead of us where we will still be using something comparable to the iPhone that we have now? And their statement is, within 10 years, there will be nothing like the iPhone. It will have been totally bypassed. They say 10 years. It could be even sooner. So what's coming at us? Where will we get our data if we're not getting it from our handheld devices, our laptops, Where is it coming and how is it coming? Well, one of the things that everybody thinks in the field, it seems, are preparing for is the head-mounted device. They have not been that successful in capturing huge market. And partly because they're hard to use, they're cumbersome, you have to put something on, and a lot of people have just resisted them because of that. But with every passing year, they've been made lighter weight, easier to handle. And so something like the head-mounted device is what will take the place of the iPhone, according to the Apple study. What does that mean for us in terms of scholarship? Well, just to indicate how you can do a lot less than having this big thing on your head, is that the ground crews at Singapore Airport now use what's called augmented reality, AR, augmented reality glasses, which simply means that in one lens of the glasses, the person working on the ground crew can see another whole screen. And that screen gives him the information that he needs about what's happening in other parts of the airport, what needs to be done now. The communication link between himself and the office is through these AR glasses rather than a telephone. Number one, it's very noisy out there. He's out there with the planes. He's loading or seeing them loading. So this is an indication to me that yes, and the head-mounted devices are not so pleasant in a way, but there are many ways to make them, and people are going to make them much more feasible for our use. One of the things I think that's beginning to happen is that we're now having people sit together on head-mounted devices, and they are seeing the same thing. In other words, we can begin to do classes, because with the classes, it could mean that everybody in the room will be having the same information, the same data. Or if you work alone and you're doing research, you can have your own particular type of three-dimensional data coming at you. And as the younger people become more familiar with these head-mounted devices and they're used as multiples in a classroom, I think that we can begin to understand that this is moving toward a place where this particular device has the potential to change at least a classroom situation in ways which we've never had the ability to do. I'm showing you a PowerPoint. Well, in the future, these little PowerPoints with their static images and everything that I'm showing you, of course, will be totally outdated. And you'll look back and you'll laugh and you'll say 20 years from now, remember that way we used to go have classes? People showed PowerPoints. And a younger generation will say, what are they? What was a PowerPoint? And they will try to explain, well, it was a primitive way of using image and voice, but of course, nothing compared to what we have, they will say, in their day, what we have now. So one of the things which is coming is this idea of a shared virtual reality. It's one thing to create a virtual reality experience for one person, but we need to always, in the educational field, make sure that we can share that virtual reality. When the virtual reality is shared, then instruction can take place. And one of the things about virtual reality instruction, which they're beginning to study, is the curve of forgetting the data. In other words, we have a big problem in education as well as in any kind of training. You train somebody or you come and take this class, how much will you retain in 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years? Just listening to my voice and looking at static PowerPoints will give you a bit more time of memory, but probably in the long run, it is very hard for people to retain more than 10% of anything they hear or is taught to them, except when there is this shared virtual reality. Some of the research is showing that with the virtual reality, the retention rate is much higher, and that it's much higher for those who share the virtual reality. And it's hard to know why that's true and whether it will hold up. I don't know. As you know, I have attempted to do VR without a headset. In our exhibit in Taiwan and Hong Kong for the maritime Buddhism, we use projections. People do not have to wear anything. They walk into a room, they either go into what's called a half cave or they go into a 360-degree screen room, and they have the VR experience without the headset. And it, of course, is shared with anybody else who is standing with them looking at this projected virtual reality. It's very expensive right now. It's hard to maintain. We've already had one of our items in the exhibition was that you can pull a monitor along a rail and it will change and give you different images for different times and different places. And people like it a lot because they can go at their own speed and they can see many, many things as they speed along. Well, so many people were using it and probably going a little too fast that it caught on fire and we had to fix the whole thing. So VR without a headset is not without its problems. The expense, keeping up all the projectors. So we have, something like 21 projectors showing at the same time. all controlled through a laptop. And recently, something happened to one of the projections, and instead of being seamless, a line appeared. And it took quite a while to correct that and to get the image back into tune. So while VR without a headset and having this environment for a museum is very nice, and people love it, and young people especially love it, they can't get some of the young people to leave the exhibit. They just want to stay because there's a lot to see, and they just revel in it. But again, you pay a price for everything that you do. And having VR without a headset has a very heavy price tag. So here are the three kinds of reality. There's augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality. Augmented reality is when you have a picture or you have a live image, and you augment it by being able to draw a line on it or change in the sense of laying down layers on top of it. Virtual reality, as most of you, the last slide gives you an idea of that. Virtual reality is where you're immersed. It's immersive. It is all around you. And in virtual reality, you can also have some augmented reality issues. And then there's mixed reality, where you have the real thing in which you project onto it, or you change the real thing, if it's an image, so that it's mixed. It's both virtual or augmented. So let me show you what I mean by this. Here's an augmented reality. You watch football game, and when you're watching the football game, you'll see the reality of the white lines and the green turf of the playing field. But then on the screen is this yellow line, which is the first down marker. And it looks so real that you think it's a mark on the field, but it's completely virtual. The people in the stands do not see it. Your augmented reality shows you something that only people looking at it through a device can see. But it gives you a lot of information if you're waiting to see whether or not your team is going to make it across that line and have a first down. We never had anything like this before. You have to wait for an umpire to come down and tell you whether, or a referee to tell you whether or not the ball was beyond a certain point. But the virtual line, which is here, is now used up in the booth by the people who are watching and making sure the game is being played within all the rules. They use that to make their decision on whether or not the call of the referee is correct or needs to be changed. The other thing about augmented reality is you can take a real thing, like a picture of the Parthenon, and you can, through your device, take it back to what the ruin used to be like. Now, for tourism, this is a really wonderful thing. That is, when you're at a ruin, the problem is being at ruins. One ruin sometimes looks like another. It's just a pile of stones. So how do you make that ruin come alive and be so interesting? And part of that is augmented reality. You simply, as the person stands there, they can watch line by line as the original form of the structure is presented to you. And as you see it in this light, you understand it much better. For education, a really crucial part of augmented reality will be when it can be made interactive. That is, when the student can have augmented reality, and yet at the same time, they can be interactive with it, and they can change what they're seeing and what they experience. That's much more difficult. But once interactive augmented reality is in place for young people, it is a thrill. So we have done interactive augmented reality for the installation and the exhibit in Taiwan, the museum. There are posts that have in them controls so that in the virtual reality setting, someone can go up to the post and they can move it around and they can go to one place or go to another. Now, the only problem is, of course, they take everybody in the room with them because we only have all the projection is set up so everybody's seeing the same projection. So whoever is at the post having fun, everybody else in the room has to have the same fun. They're always wanted, so there are problems with that. But with the head-mounted device, you can have this interactive augmented reality, and it can be, in terms of education, a wonderful tool. Now, for us, we work with manuscripts, we work with old documents, and some of them are very fragile. Some of them should never be allowed to be handled by people, or not very much, and only handled by experts. So as a result, it's very hard, for example, to use the documents left by someone during the Roman period like this one. How do you allow people to have access to a fragile ancient document? And once again, the augmented reality is a great tool. For example, here's a library. In their bookcases, they have stacks of rare books that they don't want people to handle. So what if I want to read one of those books? Then they have a little tray for you. You go over, it's like a computer, but it's augmented reality. You open up and you see an image of whatever page in whatever book it is that you're interested in, so that while you do it in the library. Now, I don't think you have to do it in the library. I think you could do it anywhere in the world. And that, again, would require another whole set of ideas and understanding of how you make available these fragile documents for people to study. The other thing with virtual reality is to try to give the person the same experience they would have if they were actually turning the pages and reading the book. It's much more interactive if I have a pair of virtual hands that can actually turn the pages for me. I have the experience then that I'm really holding on to that ancient document. That's why interaction with the data can be so crucial to learning and to the way in which we feel when we handle the material. Another thing which is coming up is that we go on to Netflix and we have movies on demand. But what they're now working on is to have a virtual reality movie on demand where you feel that you walk into a theater and sit down in a seat and the movie is turned on and you participate as if you had gone to the theater. In terms of education, this is again a really important issue that you can emulate real life situations in the virtual reality so that the virtual reality is more understandable. And the use of the images in the virtual reality are not so fleeting and so hard to comprehend. The other thing we can do, of course, with this is to enhance. For example, if you have an ancient manuscript where it has faded or it has become so covered with oxidation that you can't read it anymore, you can begin to use the technology which removes that color and oxidation until finally you can have the experience of really being able to read the document. You've never touched it. You can be halfway around the world and you can use this kind of information to deal with these crucial issues. And the other thing which is going to happen in this new virtual reality is that when you do a search, it should return to you all the information that you need in ways which are not now possible. For example, when you put in a keyword, you should get back all the information about that keyword and the criteria. And finally, if you've got too much in there, you can take something out. You can enter into the process. This is still very much in its infancy, but eventually it's going to be part of what's happening in the world of scholarship, that the software in the virtual reality or augmented reality will automatically do everything it can do. And you don't have to figure out how to tell it to do all those tasks. And then it presents you with an image so that you can look at whatever one of those processes is the one that you're interested in. And you haven't had to do 1,500 clicks and have to learn how to enter and define and all of that. It will just do it for you and give you an image and say, here it is, everything is here. Now, I predict that for all of you, if you become teachers, at some time in your life, and probably for a large part of your life, you're going to be virtual teachers. Just as I'm a virtual teacher at this moment, this is where we are. Now, virtual teaching needs to be improved. Virtual teaching means I should be able to experience the teacher doing what they do ordinarily, except it's happening in my device. I can be right up close and see what's happening. I don't have to have long distance glasses to sit in the back of the room to figure out what's being put on the whiteboard. So being a virtual teacher, there are now universities who are beginning to offer courses on training people to be virtual teachers. And I think they're very wise. I think all of you at one time or another need to take courses in how to be a virtual teacher and how to make use of all this virtual reality and augmented reality and mixed reality, and to understand that distance learning has in fact become very close-up learning through the virtual reality environment. And now there is a hope that in the future, for example, that through holographic methods and other ways, you could have a school auditorium filled with children, and you could present to them as if it's really happening in front of them, a whale jumping out of the water right in front of them, and they're having that experience of virtual reality without head mask or anything else. These things, I think, are coming. So we're left with the fact that what's going to happen is we have a physical world, and now we have a virtual world. But in many ways, we have always had a virtual world, because the real world, the physical world, is only experienced with us when we are able to have a mental construct. So it's nothing new in a way. It's the way human experience has been from the beginning of that experience. We've been living in virtual reality all our lives. And now we're beginning to understand what that means to have that virtual reality. And we are creating these environments in which the virtual reality can be used, manipulated. We can interact with it. We can change it. And I think we can learn a lot by being involved in a virtual reality environment. So this is the last lecture for this course. I thank you for sticking with me as a virtual teacher through a virtual class with all of our primitive techniques of the present day. We will see enormous changes coming at us. I look at your lives and I think to myself that you need to just be aware of what's coming at you, and being aware of it to, rather than struggling or fighting against it, figure out how you can have your place in the sun with all this new technology and new methodologies. I think that it will be a boon to education, to the way in which we learn, and that we will learn things that we had never been able to teach before. I really feel that there is something that happens when we put people into a virtual reality environment and we show them all the things that can go on in that reality. Because in a sense, what we're doing is to show them what they already experience in perception. It's not that different. Perception is a form of virtual reality. So we're helping people deal with their perceptive process by showing it to them and showing it to them in an interactive and startling fashion. Thank you for taking the course. I've enjoyed being with you. I've enjoyed listening to your researches. We've come a long way from dealing with palm leaves, stalks of plants, paper, birch bark, rock, clay, metal, type, printing presses. And it's all been wonderful. All those are great inventions. They have changed the world. And you're lucky enough, you're going to see the next big change. And I think it's going to happen in your lifetimes. So again, thank you for taking the course. I hope to see you again. Thank you.